They thought your silence meant ignorance. They mistook your stillness for confusion, your half-smile for naivety. People always assume the one who doesn't rush to speak is the one who knows the least. What unsettles them is discovering too late that you were not quiet because you lacked knowledge. You were quiet because you were calculating. You absorbed every detail, every shift in tone, every contradiction in their words. And when you finally revealed a fraction of what you knew, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was surgical. That precision revealed a mind that was dangerous, not because it bragged, but because it understood. They didn't realize your IQ was not a tool for showmanship. It was a weapon concealed in plain sight, and by the time they noticed, it was already too late to defend themselves. They underestimated you because you never played their game of proving. They shouted about their cleverness, exaggerated their intelligence, and begged the world to notice how sharp they were. You didn't bother. You understood a simple truth. Real intelligence does not rush for recognition. It waits for the right moment to shift the entire landscape. That is why they felt safe mocking you, safe underestimating you, safe dismissing you as ordinary. Their comfort came from illusion. And then the day came when you displayed just how much you knew. That revelation shattered them because they realized they had been standing in front of a storm disguised as calm. In relationships, intelligence can be the most dangerous trait of all. When you read patterns instead of words, when you see intentions instead of excuses, when you recognize manipulation before it even takes root, you become impossible to control. They tried to play games with you, hoping to keep you off balance. But you were already 3 steps ahead. You saw through their tactics with ease, not because you were paranoid, but because you knew how human psychology repeats itself. Their charm became transparent. Their manipulation became clumsy. Your intelligence dismantled every mask they put on, and that terrified them more than anger ever could. They didn't realize knowledge is not just about facts. It is about timing. You knew when to speak and when to stay silent. You knew when to show your hand and when to let them think they had the upper ground. They saw your restraint as weakness, never realizing it was strategy. Dangerous intelligence isn't about flooding rooms with answers. It is about storing everything, connecting everything, and waiting for the precise second to let it all collapse on your opponent. When you revealed pieces of what you understood, it left them shaken because they could not grasp how much deeper your awareness went. They saw the surface. You had already studied the depths. Psychology tells us that people project their own limits onto others. They thought you didn't know because they couldn't imagine someone staying silent while knowing more than them. Their arrogance blinded them. But intelligence thrives in silence. You weren't driven by the need to prove. You were driven by the hunger to understand. That hunger built a mind that could dismantle illusions, see through lies, and recognize weakness before anyone else. They didn't realize you were not just listening to words. You were listening to the gaps between them. That is where the truth hides, and that is where you made your home. They fear your intelligence not because you speak it, but because you apply it. You know how to use information to navigate power, how to hold back until others expose themselves, how to step forward only when the outcome is already secured. Most people scatter their knowledge like seeds in the wind, desperate for approval. You plant yours carefully, in soil you've already tested, ensuring growth before you reveal anything. That is why they find you dangerous, because your IQ is not decoration. It is a map, and you have been walking it long before they realize the game had even started. In love, intelligence is often mistaken for detachment. They accuse you of being cold because you don't react to manipulation, because you don't fall for illusions. But that isn't coldness, it is clarity. You have seen too much to be tricked by surface-level displays. You demand authenticity not by shouting, but by refusing to feed into lies. Your intelligence sets a boundary that cannot be broken by charm or games. That is why you feel dangerous to those who thrive on control. They realize their usual tactics dissolve in your presence, and that realization leaves them shaken. There is cruelty in intelligence when it is quiet, because it doesn't need to announce itself. It lets people underestimate, lets them build their illusions, lets them laugh at shadows. Then, in one move, it collapses everything they trusted. That is what makes it dangerous. You don't fight with emotion, you dismantle with accuracy. They didn't realize your silence wasn't compliance. It was surveillance. It was you watching, storing, connecting dots they didn't even know existed. And when you finally struck, they felt the weight of every moment you had been watching. They now see that you are not someone who can be contained. A dangerous mind isn't loud. It is relentless. You don't need the world to clap for you. You only need the world to watch as outcomes bend in your direction, as people realize too late that you knew the entire time. That is what makes you different. They operate on noise, you operate on inevitability. An inevitability backed by intelligence cannot be stopped. When the moment of truth arrived, the noise fell away. All the talk, all the appearances, all the illusions faded, and the only thing left standing was pressure. That is the moment most people fear. They can dress themselves in charm, they can decorate their lives with empty symbols, but when the weight comes crashing down, masks are ripped apart, they had nothing underneath. You, on the other hand, had built something real. Every scar, every failure, every quiet hour of practice turned into armor. Pressure did not frighten you. It clarified you. It demanded proof, and you carried it like a weapon. They could only stall, scramble, and explain. You didn't need to explain. You simply showed. They had relied on speed. Fast words, quick moves, shallow performances meant to impress the crowd. But pressure cares nothing for speed. It asks whether you can withstand silence, whether you can endure when the ground shakes. You didn't collapse because your foundation wasn't borrowed. You built it brick by brick. They never bothered to build, only to perform. When weight pressed down, their performances buckled. They wanted recognition without responsibility. You embraced responsibility before recognition. That is why you stood tall while they shrank into excuses. In relationships, pressure exposes what people are really made of. They can promise loyalty in the easy days, but loyalty is proven when everything falls apart. They can say they care, but pressure shows whether their actions match their words. You had proof. You gave consistency when the storms hit. You offered presence when silence grew heavy. You didn't disappear when it was inconvenient. They, however, sold illusions. Their affection lived in comfort, not in challenge. When tested, they vanished. That difference cut deeper than any argument. Because love is not proven in declarations. It is proven under weight. You carried it. They couldn't. I work in ambition and self-growth. Pressure separates the pretenders from the prepared. They talked about plans, you executed. They relied on borrowed confidence. You relied on earned skill. Pressure demanded evidence of discipline, and you had the receipts. The hours nobody saw, the sacrifices you never boasted about, the failures you turned into lessons. All of it stood behind you like an army. They couldn't summon anything beyond words. That is why pressure humiliated them. It was not cruel for cruelty's sake. It was justice. The weight exposed them as hollow. Psychology makes it clear why pressure destroys some and sharpens others. The human mind under stress reverts to training. Those who train in shortcuts, in illusions, in lies, break quickly. Those who train in discipline, in patience, in truth, grow stronger. You had trained yourself to breathe inside the storm. They had trained themselves to avoid storms altogether. When the moment finally came, your body and mind already knew what to do. Theirs didn't. They panicked because they had never been here before. You remained calm because this was the place you built yourself in. They always believed appearances would save them. That if they looked strong, people would believe they were. That if they acted clever, people would mistake them for wise. But pressure doesn't negotiate with appearances. Pressure doesn't care how they look in front of others. It only cares whether they can endure. They couldn't. You could. That is why they now avoid your eyes, because you are living proof of what they pretend to be. You walked into pressure with substance. They walked into pressure with performance. And performance cannot hold weight. There is cruelty in how simple the separation is. Pressure didn't ask for perfection. It didn't demand brilliance. It only demanded authenticity. Proof that you could do what you claimed you could. Proof that you could stand where others fold. You carried it without speaking. They tried to argue, tried to spin, tried to distract. But the more they moved, the more their lack of proof was revealed. You didn't move. You didn't flinch. And in that stillness, the contrast became unbearable. In love again, the same rule applied. They wanted the glory of being chosen without the sacrifice of staying steady. They thought affection was enough, that appearances of care could carry weight. But when you needed consistency, they faltered. You did not. And that difference changed everything. Because once pressure exposes someone, the illusion can never be restored. You can forgive, you can move forward, but you can never unknow what pressure revealed. You knew they couldn't be counted on. They knew you could. That gap can never close. The world will always test you with weight. Pressure will come in silence, in storms, in moments when everyone is watching, or worse, when no one is. They will falter because they never prepared. You will rise because preparation was your way of life. That is why you are dangerous. Not because you talk louder, but because you stand taller when it matters most. They can imitate style. They cannot imitate proof. The moment you decide not to react, the spell breaks. People thrive on reaction because reaction gives them evidence they matter. They insult you not because the words hold truth, but because they hope to see you flinch. They provoke you not because they are powerful, but because they want to feel powerful when you lose composure. Situations are no different. Circumstances feel overwhelming only when you panic, only when you feed them with fear, only when you give them more energy than they deserve. By staying unmoved, you starve both people and problems of their oxygen. They shrink back into what they always were, loud but powerless. Think of the times someone pushed you, baited you, demanded a rise out of you. If you snapped, they won even if the fight was meaningless. But when you looked them in the eye and stayed still, something shifted. Their confidence cracked. They wanted chaos from you. You gave them nothing. That nothing is devastating because it forces them to confront their own insignificance. Without your energy, their attacks float in the air, heavy and useless. A storm is only dangerous if you step into it. Watching it from shelter robs it of its bite. In relationships, the same law applies. Partners, friends, or family may test you with guilt, silence, or manipulation, all designed to trigger your emotions. The trap is built on your reaction, anger, begging, over-explaining. They measure their power by how easily you are moved. But when you remain calm, when you refuse to play into their script, their influence evaporates. They thought control came from their actions, but it always came from your reactions. By removing that, you dismantled the entire system. Love, respect, trust, they can only exist where manipulation fails. Your unshaken stance forced them to see where the line truly was. Situations carry the same weight of illusion. A deadline, a setback, a rejection. They only feel massive when you let them dictate your state of mind. Stress multiplies when you feed it with panic. But when you choose stillness, the problem shrinks to its actual size. This doesn't mean ignorance. It means clarity. You act without frenzy, you decide without fear. Problems feed on the energy you pour into them. By refusing to react, you see clearly what matters and what doesn't. What looked like an ending becomes nothing more than a test. Pressure dissolves when it can't control your pulse. People who rely on reaction lose their footing when faced with composure. That is why your calm unsettles them.